Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this
For the first time in nearly 2 decades, voters in Colorado's 5th Congressional District will have a new representative.
We are actually going to be here to fight for your rights, to fight for our rights, to fight for the lives of people.
I still think it's about border security, about trimming the size and scope of the federal government.
Tonight, we hear from two of the candidates looking to get the job, Democratic candidate River Gasson and Republican candidate Jeff Crank. Where they stand on the major issues facing voters here at home, and how will they respond to issues facing the country if they're elected? This is the Congressional District 5 debate.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this 5th Congressional District debate. I'm Allison Zimmerman. I'll be your moderator this evening. Tonight, we'll be hearing from Democratic candidate River Gasson and Republican candidate Jeff Crank. I'm also joined by 3 panelists of esteemed journalists in our community this evening. I'm very happy to be joining the stage with Gazette reporter Brianna Gent, Colorado Politics senior reporter Ernest Lunning, and News5 senior reporter Brett Forrest. Tonight's format is as follows. There will be no opening statements. Candidates will have 2 minutes for a closing statement at the conclusion of tonight's debate. Now, most question response times will be 90 seconds. Now, candidates will offer 1 minute for rebuttals at my discretion throughout this debate. Tonight, we'll be asking about key issues ranging from a variety of topics facing both our country and Congressional District 5, which includes nearly all of El Paso County. A reminder, candidates have not been provided these questions ahead of time. We did hold a coin toss just now to determine the order of the first question and closing statements. And the results of that coin toss is we will begin with Mr. Crank for this first question. So, candidates, are we ready?
We're ready.
Let's get started. All right, Mr. Crank, you will have 1 minute for this first question. The 5th Congressional District has only been represented by Republicans in its 50-year history and has been represented by Doug Lamborn for nearly 20 years. But the district is changing. Why are you best suited to represent this seat?
Well, first of all, thank you for, thanks to KOAA TV, the Gazette, El Pomar, and thank you to River as well for joining me for this debate and for everybody here. Look, I have lived in Colorado. I was born and raised here. I've lived here my whole life, and I've been integrally involved in our community for 33 years. I've worked on Capitol Hill. I've worked with our local military installations to make sure that they remain strong. I've worked with our military and our veterans community, and I think I am a good fit for this district, just ideologically and philosophically. And I'm excited about the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C., and to work very hard to represent all of the citizens of the 5th Congressional District.
Ms. Gasson, same question to you. You will have 1 minute. Why are you best suited to represent this seat?
Awesome. Well, thank you for that question. Thank you guys all for being here, and thank you for our gracious host for having us and putting it all together. I know it's not easy. And quite frankly, I feel like what we need right now in the House of Representatives is someone who is going to put partisanship aside and lead with data and lead with scientific expertise. I'm a scientist, I'm an educator, and I feel like what we need is nonpartisan consideration. We need someone who comes up with evidence-based solutions. I hear a lot of solutions and I hear a lot of problems, but what I don't see is a lot of solutions to the problems we currently have. I'm also running because we need women to have the rights to their own bodies. We need to have solutions at our southern border, not just a wall. We need to have solutions for affordable housing, and we need to help our veterans. It's a national security threat right now. The fact that recruitment is at an all-time low is a reflection of the fact that we're not showing the young people today that we're serving and protecting those who serve and protect us. Thank you.
All right, let's get started. This first question will come from Bree with the Gazette.
Jeff, this question is for you. You'll have 1 minute and 30 seconds. Former President Donald Trump has said that Aurora has been overrun by members of a gang from Venezuela. Meanwhile, Aurora's mayor, former Republican Congressman Mike Kaufman, has said those claims are grossly exaggerated and that the gang's activity was limited to a few apartment buildings and has been contained. Do you agree with the president or with Mayor Kaufman? And what do you see as being the main immigration issue in Colorado?
Well, just a few apartment complexes. I guess that's okay as long as you don't live in those apartment complexes. Look, this is the United States of America. We should not have private property being taken over by gangs. We're better than that. We're America, and we can do better. And look, I don't know how much of Aurora has a gang problem, but I know when I talk to Michael Allen, our district attorney here, he tells me we have a gang problem. When I talk to folks all across Colorado, we have a gang problem. We have a problem with crime. We all see the rising crime rates in Colorado and across America. So look, my view is this: we ought to go after the folks. First of all, we need to secure the southern border, and it's just that simple. And once we do, we need to go after the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of felons who over the last several years have snuck over the border. And can we not agree that we can start with deporting them? They have no right to be here in our country. They are criminals, and they should be deported, whether they're in Aurora or they're somewhere else. And I would just say, I mean, it just seems like this manufactured thing that everybody wants to talk about. Well, Trump said this and this person. Do we have a gang problem and a crime problem in Colorado? You bet we do. And we need to fix it, and we need to solve it.
Ms. Gasson, I'll give you 1 minute to respond to Mr. Crane.
Thank you. Well, there's no evidence that there has been an increase in violence or gang violence in Aurora. Actually, the data says this, that the height of violence in Aurora and with crime was with auto theft, which peaked in 2020 and has been decreasing in the years since. That's what the numbers say. There is no concrete evidence to suggest any gang violence. And when it comes to securing our border, what we need to do is look for empathetic solutions that actually involve those who are working on our southern border and what they say. The ICE border security agents were in support of the bipartisan immigration bill that was going to allow more border security agents, more asylum judges, and more caseworkers, all things that are desperately needed at the southern border. Because quite frankly, we know walls don't work. They never have, and it's not going to work in the diverse ecosystem that is in the towns of the southern border either. Thank you.
Ernest.
Right, thanks. I've got a question for, we'll start with River on this one, and it's also involves immigration. River, you've said that it's time for compassionate immigration reform that would allow immigrants a quick and reasonable path to citizenship. If elected, what does that path look like, and which immigrants would qualify?
Those who seeking asylum would be determined by the asylum caseworkers and by the judges that would work on the southern border, or just in the immigration process altogether. My great-grandmother came here from Ireland. She was an immigrant, and she was able to get a quick path to citizenship. Suddenly, it takes more than 2 decades now to get a path to citizenship. My friend Nicole, who came here at the age of 4, didn't get citizenship until she was almost 30. And that was after it was expedited, after she got married here, after she has kids here in the United States, and got her law degree here in the United States, and English is her first language. It should not be taking 2.5 decades to get a path to citizenship. What we need is to have work visas in place, so immigrants who come here are able to pay into our tax system. We need to have student visas in place that will give us the best opportunities to have the smartest minds here in the United States. That's what empathetic immigration reform looks like.
And you still have 48 seconds.
I think I answered the question.
Okay.
Okay. Then Jeff,
Mr. Crane.
1 minute. Who should be on a path to citizenship in the United States?
Well, I think law-abiding citizens, first and foremost. I think it's too difficult to get to the United States legally. I totally agree with that. But why is it? Because we have people cutting in line. I mean, we have people who are breaking the law and cutting in line and making it more difficult for law-abiding citizens who want to come here to the United States. And so for me, I'm all in favor of us streamlining and fixing a very broken immigration system. But let me be clear, the American people, they don't care about all of that. What they care about is border security, and they're tired of the bait and switch that happens up in Washington, D.C. all the time. The bait and switch of, well, we'll give you this if you give us that, and we got to come up with some grand compromise. They're tired of it. Fix the border, get border security, then we can talk about who gets to stay, who gets to go, all of those sorts of things. But border security has to be first.
Okay, I've got a follow-up for both of you, and talking about something that President Trump has said, mass deportations. If re-elected, former President Trump has proposed carrying out what he's called the largest deportation effort in our nation's history. He proposes using ICE agents, as well as the FBI, National Guard, local law enforcement, federal prosecutors, and potentially the military to deport as many as 25 undocumented immigrants. If elected, would you support these policies? And please explain your answer. And Jeff, we'll start with you. You each get 1 minute.
Sure. Well, look, I love how every time I hear this question phrased, it's always mass deportations, because I think that's the scary word, mass. Should we deport the people who went and shoved automatic or semi-automatic firearms in the faces of those people in the Aurora apartment complexes? Yes. Should we deport the people that are flooding our streets with fentanyl and are here illegal? You bet we should. And we should start with them. And I am fully in favor of starting with them. Now, as to the rest, we can figure all of that out about who gets to stay, who gets to go. But I got to tell you, we've got to have a system in America that respects the rule of law, that respects people who respect the rule of law. I mean, try to go to a Taylor Swift concert and cut in line and see what happens to you, right? I mean, you need to respect people who have been waiting in line patiently. They are the ones that are bearing the brunt of this broken system.
Ms. Gasson, you'll have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, first off, I disagree that mass is a scary word that just simply defines something that has matter. But what I am afraid of is that it's going to have a huge, impact on our law enforcement. It is a burden that they quite frankly shouldn't have. Law enforcement has a primary responsibility in protecting public safety, not in dealing with what the border security agent's job is, not dealing with what the federal government is supposed to be responsible for. It's not going to be up to them to make our community, they're not going to be able to make our community safer if they're focusing on deportation of citizens, of residents. And quite frankly, what we need to do is make sure that we have a citizenship that makes sense, one that allows people who are seeking asylum here to be able to work through the process here legally, because most people that I know who have come here are trying to become citizens legally. You're not putting your child on a raft and sending them across the ocean from Cuba to the United States unless you think that's the best chance that your child has. No one's doing this because they're rapists, they're not murderers, they're not here to sell drugs or be criminals. They're here to make a better lives for themselves, and we should help them with that.
Mr. Crank, it's not reporters and political commentators using the word mass, it's President Trump using that word, and he's said that he's considering sending National Guard troops from other states into blue states to help round up on undocumented immigrants. Would you support that?
Well, what I would support is fixing the border, and once we fix the border, and I'd frankly support sending National Guard down to secure the border. I'm for doing that first. I'm then in favor of talking about other solutions. You know, the bipartisan agreement that River talked about is this heralded thing, but you know, they all act like it was that deal or no deal. Well, what would that deal have done? That deal, if it would have been agreed to, would have allowed 5,000 people to come across every single day before the law kicked in. Well, what's 5,000 people times 365 days a year? That's 1.8 million people who get a free pass to come into the United States, and we call that border security. That is not border security. Border security means enforcing the law. It doesn't mean to say 15 broken windows are okay and on the 16th one you prosecute. We have got to get control of the border. Once we do that, we need to start getting rid of the criminal elements that are here. I mean, I think we all know they're here, and we need to get rid of them, and as soon as we do, then we can start moving through the process.
But Mr. Crank, yes or no, would you be okay with Texas National Guard helping round up undocumented immigrants in Colorado?
I think it should be a law enforcement function, not National Guard.
Okay, thanks. River?
May I have the opportunity to clarify?
Please.
The 5,000 people that would be coming in a day, so to speak. This is to say what is a limitation for what the border security agents, what the ICE security agents, and what our asylum judges can take in, what their capacity is every day. After you close that border, so to speak, you turn off commerce. The mayors in the border towns there, they have been outspoken against having a limitation to the number of people who cross every day. What this does is how many people can cross through a legal port of entry. After you shut that down, then they only have the opportunity to come in illegally. I just wanted to clarify that.
All right, and we're going to move on now. Brett will take this question. It'll be directed towards you, Ms. Gasson, talking about foreign policy.
Yeah, and we'll have both candidates able to answer this, but River, you'll be first. So the U.S. has sent around $18 billion to Israel since the October 7th attack over a year ago, and yet there appears to be no end in sight, and the conflict appears to be widening. Israel is our closest ally in the Middle East, but there's concerns about what we're funding with an enormous toll in Gaza. What do you want to see happen, and how much more funding would you be willing to approve?
Well, what I'd like to see happen is a ceasefire. I'd like to see the hostages returned safely, and I'd like to see the Palestinian people be able to live again safely. Right now, what we're seeing is an endless battle. We're seeing a generation of Palestinians that are going to be very angry against the Israeli people. And we see Benjamin Netanyahu, who is creating a bad name for Israel right now. Most of the Jewish friends I have are against Benjamin Netanyahu right now. I do feel like they've gone too far. I don't want a complete cutoff of the funding, because they do need to be able to defend themselves against Iranian attacks. But I would like to see that the funding has a stipulation that they make an effort to decrease civilian casualties of the Palestinians. I also feel like it's going to require a two-state solution of some kind, recognizing both Israel and Palestine as two independent states of two independent governments.
Mr. Crank, you will also have 90 seconds.
Well, what I want to see is Hamas and Hezbollah wiped off the face of the earth as a military force, period. Israel is our closest ally in the United States. After September 11th, there were no government officials in Israel saying that the U.S. should only pursue some of al-Qaeda, a little bit of al-Qaeda, go after 5% of al-Qaeda. They supported us going after al-Qaeda, chasing them down in caves and killing them. And this idea that there is some moral equivalency between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah. Now look, the Palestinian people, many of them, are good people, and they are victims in this. But why are they victims? They're victims because on October 7th, a year ago, vicious criminals and terrorists attacked Israel, unprovoked attack on Israel. Israel has consistently recognized the right of the Palestinian people to exist. But the Palestinians have not recognized the right of an Israeli state. You cannot have a two-state solution unless both sides agree. If I'm going to negotiate with you on buying a house, you have to agree that what I say is worth listening to. It's worth having a discussion with me. If you can't do that, you're never going to find peace. So first and foremost, until they recognize Israel's right to exist, there can be no negotiation.
And Ms. Gasson, I do want to give you 1 minute to respond.
Okay. Well, I don't want to see a complete annihilation of the Palestinian people, quite frankly, which is what I fear is, in fact, what Benjamin Netanyahu is working towards. I think there is a level of, colonialization that is still presided, a situation that's older than anyone who is in this room even. And quite frankly, the back and forth between, rather it was started now with the hospitals in Gaza being bombed, rather it was started on October 7th, or rather it was started years ago. Rather it was started when Israel became a country recognized by the UN, or before the Palestinian people were there, or before the Hebrew people were there. This situation is older than all of us, but what we cannot see is a genocide. And quite frankly, I'm worried that's what we're heading towards right now. We need to make sure that everyone's life is prioritized, because human life does need to be a first priority in this situation.
And by the time one of you takes office, it will be nearly 3 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. Would you continue U.S. military support of Ukraine and its President Volodymyr Zelensky?
And Mr. Crank, we'll begin with you. You have 1 minute.
Well, Ukraine is a much more difficult situation than Israel. First of all, I do not want to see Russia succeed. There are some, even in my own party, who somehow act as though Russia, there's this sort of mystical view of Russia or Vladimir Putin. I don't agree with that. Vladimir Putin is a killer. He's a former KGB agent, and he has very bad intentions, obviously, on Ukraine, and he wants to reconstitute the former USSR. The question is, how much American treasure can we continue to pour into that? And so, from my perspective, we should have negotiated a solution and not allowed the intervention or the invasion into Ukraine in the first place. But now that we're there, we need to know what the money is being spent for. There needs to be an accounting that it's not just going to line the pockets of oligarchs in Ukraine, and I need to know that before I'm ever going to vote to give more money to Ukraine.
Ms. Gasson.
Yes. Well, quite frankly, I don't want to see Russia succeed, and I would spend any dollar necessary to protect American lives and prevent a World War III. If this war spills out of Ukraine, it will go into NATO territory, and every square inch of NATO territory needs to be protected. That is our obligation as the United States, and it's our obligation as part of the NATO treaty. The Ukraine signed the Proliferated Treaty in the 90s, and this is what has required us to protect them after they gave up their nuclear arsenal. They did that for our safety. They did that for Russia's safety even. And it is our responsibility to uphold our end of that deal. Not only that, but Ukraine has been by our side as an ally. I've spoken to a soldier, John Foley, who went to Afghanistan and talked to Ukrainian soldiers who said that they came there because after the United States pulled Article 5 after 9/11, they, even though they're not part of NATO, decided that they wanted to help defend the United States, believing that we would do the same when the time came for them.
And Jeff, yes or no, would you support Ukraine joining NATO after the war is resolved?
Well, I'll have to look at that. I'm going to reserve judgment on whether or not they should and see if a package comes before us to do that. I'm a little bit leery of having them join NATO because that means then that we're forever linked to, to help defend them, because I believe in NATO and I believe in the idea of NATO. So I'd need to study that and see what the situation provided.
And River, yes or no, would you support Ukraine joining NATO?
Well, I do want to see NATO become a strong alliance, and I believe Ukraine has shown themselves to be a strong ally at our side. So after the conflict is resolved, yes, I would say that Ukraine has earned their position in NATO, doing everything that they've been able to do to prevent World War III for us, and always standing by our side. I do believe that they have shown that ethics, and I do believe that they have shown that they do deserve a place in NATO in the future.
All right, we're going to turn now to the economy, and Bree will have this next question.
Yes, Ms. Gasson, I'll start with you. You'll have 90 seconds. When it comes to federal spending, we've heard from your opponent. He proposes eliminating the Department of Education, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Economic Development Administration, and the Amtrak subsidy as potential ways to cut back on federal costs. When you look at federal spending, what programs would you cut or eliminate? And please explain your answer.
Well, I would not cut the Department of Education. Quite frankly, I think that's outrageous. I mean, we need an educated population. We need to be able to send our kids to school. I'm not really sure what the alternative is. Quite frankly, most parents don't have the equipment to be able to just, quit their jobs and homeschool children. We need to have educated children so that way we don't have a population that is manipulated easily. Education is really the key to anyone's individual freedom. As far as cutting funding, we do need to be strategic, and I believe that having that is going to require a candidate that has been frugal, a candidate that has been part of the working class, a candidate that has been paycheck to paycheck, that has experienced what it's like to be off of health care. I know that if we have a single-payer health care system as a nation, we'll be saving money as opposed to how much money we're spending now. Saving money is going to be a matter of being, it's going to be a matter of being smarter. It's going to be a matter of being more frugal. And it means we need working people to work with the working dollars in our representative.
But do you have any specific programs in mind?
No wide-scale programs that I want to cut completely, no.
Okay. Mr. Krink, we'll give you 1 minute to respond.
Sure. Well, I mean, this is the problem. We're drowning in $35 trillion of debt because we have a federal government that is way too big, way bigger than our founders ever imagined. And we got folks running for Congress who say, I don't know what I'd go there to cut. I mean, that's the point. This country's going to fail. Our economy will fail at some point. We saw Greece go through it with having to put austerity measures into place. That's coming. That's coming. We're going to have to do this and confront it one day or another, and the pain will be much less now if we deal with it now. I've laid out specific agencies that I'll do, but I'll go one better. I'm for increased defense spending, but I'm also for going in and after waste, fraud, and abuse within the Department of Defense and finding that. We need to cut back to pre-COVID spending levels so that we can start to get down to a glide path of fiscal sanity. We're at $35 trillion of debt, and we're adding $1 to $2 trillion at least every single year. Unsustainable.
And this next question will be for both of you, but we'll begin with Mr. Krink.
At the end of next year, the tax cuts for individuals enacted at the end of Trump's first year in office are set to expire, which will mean taxes increase for some more than others. Where do you stand on renewing or letting any of those tax cuts expire?
Well, I'm 100% in support of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which was passed under the Trump administration. I think it lit the fire for our economy, and unfortunately, we increased spending and spent the money. And what folks don't understand often as they head to Washington, D.C., is that when you cut taxes, it doesn't always mean that you get less revenue. In fact, revenue today into the federal treasury is more than at any other time in America's history. So we're getting the revenue. We have a spending problem. So I'm in favor of reauthorizing the Trump tax cuts, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Now, there'll be some tweaks to it. I talked to Chairman Jason Smith, who's the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee and a great supporter and friend, and he said, he said, we'll probably make a few changes here and there to the tax cuts. But overall, if we don't do that, if we don't reauthorize those tax cuts, America's going to have a gigantic tax increase on its hands. If Kamala Harris gets elected, your taxes are going up, period. And I know it's easy to villainize business and to say, oh, they should pay more, they should do this. First of all, businesses pay or the wealthy in the United States, individual taxpayers, pay far more than most. And businesses drive the economic engine that funds our economy.
Ms. Gasson, same question to you.
Thank you. Well, what I'd like to do is offer tax incentives and make sure that those who are having more drought-resistant lawns are able to get a tax cut out of that. I also want to make sure that we have, a tax cut for individuals who are having children, individuals who still have children. And where I would like to see cuts is I'd like to tax the Koch brothers or the ultra-billionaires of our country, some of the individuals who have given money to Jeff Crank, for example. I'd like to see tax cuts for those people who, quite frankly, have too much money and are not putting it back into the economy. When working people have money, working people put it back into the economy. And I want to fight for those working people. I want to fight for the people who have money that they are going to actually spend within our economic system. That is what stimulates the economy.
And Mr. Crank, I'll just give you 30 seconds to respond.
I mean, we've got to renew the tax cuts. They're not for rich people. They're for all Americans. They made our economy more prosperous. They're going to continue to make our economy more prosperous. When an economy is more prosperous, it creates jobs. This isn't about how big government can get. This is about how big the American people can get. And we have to dream better and dream bigger, and we'll have a great economy, and we'll all be doing better off because we have cut taxes and made our economy roar.
We'll turn now to abortion. Ernest will take this next question.
Another big topic this year. Mr. Crank, we'll start with you. You said you'll vote for a federal law banning abortion. You said with exceptions for rape, incest, and to save the life of the mother. But that's at odds with many Republicans running in Colorado this year who say the Supreme Court's Dobbs decision left that question to the states. Why is this something that should be decided at the federal level by members of Congress and the president?
Well, I don't think it's actually a big issue with the American people. If you look at polling, it's generally not. It's a big issue with the media lots of times, and it's one of those wedge issues that I think people can throw out there and try and use to win elections or sway folks. And I will tell you, I know that Kamala Harris, that's what she wants to talk about is abortion, right? Because it's got a little sleight of hand. She doesn't want to talk about the economy. She doesn't want to talk about immigration. She wants to talk about abortion. Look, I'm pro-life. I'm 100% pro-life. I am going to, if I have to cast a vote, I am not going to cast a vote that will kill unborn babies. I'm not going to do it. That's just where I am. That's my core. I owe that to tell that to you. But look, I believe that the Dobbs decision was the right decision to return it to the states. It's not going to be an issue. That's what's so amazing about it. This isn't even going to be an issue at the federal level because Donald Trump has said he will veto any federal legislation on abortion, and Kamala Harris is for the most extreme, radical abortion things you could ever imagine. She voted twice against the Born Alive bill, where if a baby is born alive and put on a table alive, that you aren't required to give it life-saving support. She voted against that twice. She's for federal funding to the abortion. If there's anyone with an extreme position on abortion, it's Kamala Harris.
And Ms. Gasson, I'll give you 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. Well, you guys know I'm a numbers person. 70% of the American people say that they do prioritize women's reproductive rights as an issue in this election. 50% of Americans are also women, which means it does impact about 50% of us. When we have an issue of the states, what that means is we're just putting in more regulations for what should really be no one's decision other than the patient and doctor themselves. As for the Boren case that Jeff Crank is talking about, I do believe that that is just so the doctors have no legal requirement. It really doesn't have anything to do with the law. Doctors and patients are really the only ones that have a decision in what goes on between doctors and patients. There really is no room for legislation in there. When it comes to delivering a child, that is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people. When it comes to pregnancy, that is a very critical and expensive time. It is something that needs to be taken with caution and something that the American people really shouldn't have a say in. It makes no sense for people that don't know me to have a say in what I should do with my body.
All right, thanks. This question for Ms. Gasson. You said you would support codifying Roe v. Wade at the federal level to establish a legal right to abortion, and you support the ballot amendment on Colorado's ballot, which would put a right to abortion in the state constitution this year. That measure would also let state funds pay for abortion and other reproductive health care. Do you support using federal dollars to pay for abortions?
Well, as I've said a few times throughout my campaign, I am a person that believes that health care is not a luxury but should be a human right. And so, but therefore, I do believe tax dollars should pay for health care because, quite frankly, it saves us money as a country if we have a single-payer health care system. And since reproductive health care is considered health care, then yes, that would mean that it is considered to be health care and thus paid for.
Okay, thanks. Jeff, 1 minute.
Well, I mean, I guess if you want to make the argument that using tax dollars to fund abortion is somehow going to save money, I guess you can make that argument. Look, I've said it already. I'm pro-life. I'm going to vote to uphold life. I'm proud of my affiliation, where I served on the board of a great organization here in town, Life Network, that helps women. It helps women who are in crisis pregnancies. It helps them get food and clothing and teach them life skills and all of these wonderful things that it does. But as I said, there's only one radical position on abortion. It's Kamala Harris's position. I've talked about it again. She voted against the Born Alive bill. She supports taxpayer funding of abortion. She supports a uniform abortion law. And you know, it's amazing to me that people say they're pro-choice. Colorado now outlaws women choosing to do an abortion reversal pill. So how is that the right to choose? We've outlawed it in the state of Colorado. That's an abortion industry.
Ms. Gasson, I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap this up.
Well, the right to choose does include the ability to be able to choose to have children. And quite frankly, that is what we need. Quite frankly, if we could have as many kids as we want, I think a lot of us would, but that's not the reality we face. We don't have all the resources we need. We don't have a universal child care system. One of the limiting factors for a lot of families that I know is that they'll wait for the first kid to be able to go to a K-12 system before having a second because child care is too expensive. And I wonder if my candidate, who is supposedly pro-life, would be in support of a universal child care system, something that would help families decide to have children.
Okay, we're going to move on to a lightning round now. So for this, I will ask you to keep your responses to about a sentence. I'll have Ryan here put maybe 15 seconds up if you're going a little wild. But I will begin with you, River, and we'll just bounce back. Here we go. What two committees would you ask to be assigned to?
The Committee of Veterans Affairs and the Committee of Natural Resources.
Mr. Crane?
House Armed Services Committee and probably the Natural Resources Committee.
Okay. And Mr. Crane, name a Democrat in the district that you respect and can work with on congressional matters.
A Democrat in the district? Has to be someone in the district?
That's the question.
Well, I'll work with River. I'll work with River. She's in the district. I'll work with River on some things.
Okay. Ms. Gasson?
I'll work with Crank because he is the, he's on the district.
Okay, how about this? Someone,
We're done.
Someone not on this stage. Either one of you? Just one name.
I like Ken Buck.
Okay.
Did you
Not in
say
the
Ken
district?
Buck? He's not from the district, though.
Yeah.
So I can go outside the district,
Sure.
too?
I'm assuming we're going outside the district.
We're going off the rails already. Okay.
I mean, I'll work with our John Hickenlooper and our U.S. senators to keep our military bases open here in Colorado Springs.
All right. How will you vote on establishing ranked choice voting and making other changes into how Coloradans nominate candidates? Yes, no? River?
I'll start with no, because it does invite dark money into our elections, and I don't think it's actually going to allow minority groups or third-party candidates to even have a chance.
I will vote no on the ranked choice voting because I think it's confusing, and this is not a time where we need to make elections more confusing. We need to make them easier for people to understand.
You know something serious when we agree.
This is getting
And,
it's getting bad.
and Mr. Crank, how do you plan to vote on a statewide ballot measure to ban hunting big cats? Yes or no?
Oh, I absolutely oppose it. We should leave wildlife management decisions to experts, not to the voters.
River?
I am voting yes. I actually did sign that petition. I don't think we should be trophy hunting, particularly wildcats, as they are endangered.
Okay. I'll give you 30 seconds, actually, for this next one. Ms. Gazin, this actually came in from the audience. The federal minimum wage hasn't changed since 2009. Should it be increased? And if so, what should it be?
I do think it should be increased, and I think it should vary from city to city, as costs are varying from city to city. And it should be a very steady increase that increases year to year based on the cost of living. So I want to basically use data from each individual city to come up with the approximate minimum wage based on the cost of living, which here in Colorado Springs, I believe right now would be somewhere between $17 to $20 an hour.
And Jeff?
You're finding a common theme. Government solutions versus private free market solutions. No, I do not support a federal minimum wage. It is an artificial wage. Most people are making well above that. What it does, if you put one in place, is it stops kids who want to work at McDonald's and learn a skill or learn a trade to get a job. And it drives inflation. All of the inflation, when you walk into McDonald's now and you pay what you have to pay for a hamburger, some of that was driven by minimum wage laws.
Mr. Crank, do you support a federal ban on so-called ghost guns? Yes or no?
On what?
Ghost guns. I apologize.
No.
Ms. Gasson?
I would need more information more specifically on the data behind ghost guns, but defaultingly, I suppose I say yes. I mean, assuming that's not something that's used for an individual's purpose of defense.
Okay. Do you support any kind of reform to the Supreme Court, whether creating term limits or adding justices? 15 seconds.
Yes, to both. We do need term limits. If an individual like Lamborn is elected in office long enough for a whole generation of people to be born now old enough to vote against him, that's too long. I would say term limits should be about 6 years for Congress and about 6 to 8 years for Senate. And yes, I do think we need more Supreme Court justices. I don't have an exact number, but I do feel that it is dangerous that 9 people determine the laws for our entire country.
Mr. Crank?
Was the question just on the Supreme Court?
Any reform on Supreme Court would you support?
No, I do not support packing the court, as some on the left want to do, getting the answer that they like right now. I'm also not for term limits on the Supreme Court. However, I do support them for Congress.
Okay. Yes, no, for both of this. Mr. Crank, ask you first. If you're elected, will you commit to a debate every election year?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. And this one I'll give you each 30 seconds, more of a get to know you as a person question. What is your favorite spot in the 5th Congressional District if you unexpectedly find yourself with some free time?
The top of Pikes Peak, that's an easy one.
Garden of the Gods is just spectacular, obviously. And I always tell folks, if you're coming here, you got to make sure you make a stop at Garden of the Gods.
Okay. Mr. Crank, on what major issues do you disagree with your party's presidential nominee? 30 seconds.
I disagree for the most part on tariffs with Donald Trump. I know that he supports tariffs while I support them as a negotiating platform or tool. I don't support actually imposing tariffs on products because it will just make those products more expensive for consumers and it will drive up the cost of all other products in that category.
And Ms. Gasson, what major issues do you disagree with Vice President Harris?
That's a good question. Nothing comes to mind immediately. Sorry.
Can I add one more? I had 12 seconds. Spending. I also disagreed with President Trump on not getting control of spending, and we're going to have to work harder to get control of spending when he wins.
All right, Ernest.
Okay, we're done with the lightning round, but I do have a quick question for both of you. You'll have time to elaborate in our follow-up questions here. Start with River. Knowing what you know now, would you have voted to certify Joe Biden's election in 2020 when Congress met on January 6th?
Certify the election results for Joe Biden. Yes, I would.
Yeah.
As he did get the majority of the votes, and he did get the Electoral College vote
Okay.
needed to win the presidency.
Right. The incumbent did not vote to certify those results, just for some context. But
Oh, I know.
Mr. Crank,
Yes, I would have.
you would have. Okay. We'll go, Ms. Gasson, if you're elected and the states submit electors that have been certified by their state's governors and statewide election officials, will you vote to certify the vote in January, regardless of the outcome?
Yes, that's how democracy works.
Okay. Mr. Crank?
Assuming that all of the legal avenues and channels that are available to either campaign are exhausted on January 6th, yes, I would.
Okay. Do either of you have any more to talk about that? That
No.
seems to be a
No, another one that the media loves
topic
to talk
that's come
about.
up.
Yeah.
I do have a question, actually. Well, I believe what Trump has done is commit a crime on January 6th, and I'm curious if my opponent, what evidence would you need to also see that Trump is convicted of a crime? What evidence would you need to see Trump be convicted?
Well, look, I'm for the American people deciding and to get away from this lawfare of attacking this opponent and that opponent by going taking them to court and taking them and trying to impeach them 3 times and all of that. Listen, we talk all the time in this country about making sure that we are respectful of other people and that we have civil discourse. How would you work with the other side? Let me give you all a tip. One way you can't do that is to constantly call your opponent a threat to democracy. Let the American people decide in an election who the president's going to be, and then we will respect their judgment. And that goes for both parties.
So do you stand behind everything Trump has done on January 6th?
Of course not. Do you stand behind everything Kamala Harris has done?
Not everything. I don't think any two people agree on quite
Okay, so we agree on that. We don't agree with everything that our presidential nominee has done.
All right. We'll move on to Brett for this next question.
Jeff, the Colorado Republican Party has been in turmoil most of this year. You called
Really?
you called believe it or not. You called for Dave Williams to be replaced and almost immediately endorsed Eli Bremer once he was elected interim chair, though a judge has since allowed Williams to stay. Now, part of the movement against Williams were his party emails attacking the LGBTQ community, one targeting a transgender candidate for state senate. Do you denounce those attacks? And now that it appears Williams is remaining chair through the election, do you think the Republicans have enough state party support and are positioned to win in Colorado?
I said from the very beginning when my primary opponent announced that he was running for Congress that the right, honorable, and ethical thing to do would be to step down, because the judge of a trial cannot also be the prosecutor. It's one of the reasons why I didn't go through the assembly process, because the guy who's running the show was my opponent. These are things that you have to do what's right when people aren't looking. And so I have said from that moment forward that he should have stepped down. I've never changed that position, and I believe he should to this day. So that's where I am on it. I think we need to move forward, and here's what I am proud of. I'm very proud, since I won this nomination, we have been out walking with every single Republican candidate that is running. Doesn't matter if I liked them or didn't like them in the primary, I'm out working hard with them. And that's how we move forward, is we go out and we work hard to get every single Republican elected. That's what the Democrats do. If we're going to learn anything from the Democrats, let's learn that. Let's go out and fight for the parties that are, or the principles that our party believes in, and that's what I want to do.
And do you denounce the attacks against the LGBTQ community?
Of course, I think if we're going to win elections, we need to reach out to people in the middle. And look, liberty and freedom belong to every single American. I don't have to agree with you on anything. but you are entitled to liberty and freedom and justice for all.
Ms. Gasson, I'll give you 1 minute to respond.
Okay. Well, I do agree that Dave Williams is a pretty nasty individual. Some history, if you guys didn't know this, is that at UCCS, my own school, Dave Williams is the only person in history to actually get impeached from the student body government. I'm not really sure how an individual manages to get impeached from student body government and then feel like they can handle federal politics, but there you go. Yeah.
And River, this seat has never been held by a Democrat, and according to your recent FEC filing this week, campaign contributions aren't exactly pouring into this race. Can you realistically win this seat, and do you think this race is a priority for the Democratic Party?
Well, if everything is a priority, then nothing's a priority. So I don't feel like this seat is a priority for the Democratic Party, but what I do feel like is that we are moving in the right direction. We've had a steady trend towards Democratic candidates for the past decades plus. And in 2006 or 2008, for example, we had a 13-point jump. We're currently 8 points away from moving, and we have seen candidates move by 8 points before, not just in this district, but also in other districts. So I do believe there is a possible path to victory, but it's going to require a lot of hope. It's going to require a lot of people seeing through the burnout that we've felt for the past few decades in this district. I know there are Democrats here, and I hope to be a voice for them. I also hope to be a voice for everyone. All I can really do at the end of the day is say my truth. All I can do is just be who I am and put myself out there, and at the end of the day, as long as I continue to just say what I believe is true, I'll be able to stand by everything. But yes, I do believe there is a path to victory. There has to be. I know that we're not going to be red forever, and if it doesn't happen this cycle, it's going to the next.
Mr. Crank, I'll give you 30 seconds.
Sure. Well, look, first and foremost, I'm glad that River is running. If she wasn't and we gave up running opponents, then there wouldn't be any choice in America, and I'm for choice. I'm for free markets. I'm for all of you deciding. But look, I feel really good about where we are in this campaign right now, but part of the reason I feel that is that this is a resurgent party right now. We're doing a better job of articulating our message. Not just me, but I think Republicans across the state of Colorado, that we're for liberty, we're for freedom, we're for individual rights, and we're going to go out and continue to make that case, and we're going to win this race.
All right, we're going to talk about education now. Have Bree take this over.
Mr. Crank, we'll start with you. You'll have 90 seconds.
Sure.
In the context of determining the proper role of federal government, we're going back to the Department of Education here. You said you don't believe there should be a federal Department of Education. Yeah. Can you please explain your stance? Why do you support eliminating this department? Sure,
because we lived without it for over 200 years. It wasn't even formed until the 1970s. I mean, it is a creation of Jimmy Carter. I mean, we did okay educating our kids. In fact, are we better off today with K through 12 education than we were before then? I don't think so. Look, I'm not going to go to Washington. I don't want to make every decision for you. I want you to be able to make those decisions. I don't want to go there and decide what kind of school your kids should go to and what kind of energy you should want to use or what kind of car you should try to drive. I want you to have those decisions in your hands. The best way to do that is to have it be the way that our founders intended, which is to have a system where parents get elected to school boards and make the decisions about the kind of education that their kids get. So that's why I want to get rid of the Federal Department of Education. I'm not against education. It's easy to say that. It's easy to throw that out and say, well, he's for eliminating the Department of Education, so he's not for education. No, I am. I'm for reform. I'm for education savings accounts. I'm for allowing parents to make the decisions about what's best for their kids and not locking kids into a broken system.
Ms. Gasson, what do you make of that?
Well, first off, we're not telling kids where to go to school, and we're not telling parents where to put their kids to school. Kids actually, and parents actually, have the choice to put their kids in any school that they see fit. Typically, most parents choose the one that's driving distance. My own mom decided to take me to Arapahoe High School because she was afraid of the history at Columbine, which was the closest school to me. And after the shooting in 2013, she asked me if I wanted to continue to go to Arapahoe, and I said yes. My friends were there. And my younger brother decided to make the decision to go out of district and then go to Mount Vista High School. And that's because we had the choices to go to whatever school we wanted to. We are smarter than we were in the 1970s. It's critical that we have a well-funded education system. Education is the backbone of our society. Education is the one thing no one can ever really take away from you. It's the thing that keeps us all thinking, quite frankly. We need to be able to read. We need to be able to challenge kids. And I want the society around me to be more educated because I benefit when I hear voters say they're going to do their own research. If everyone did that, I feel like we would have a stronger, more exciting society.
Could I just follow up on that?
I'll give you 30 seconds.
30 seconds? Look, we don't get to send our kids to where we want. In Colorado, you do have school choice within public schools, but there's lots of states that don't have that. We're running for federal office, so we ought to free up other states that don't have that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you know, if you shop at King Soopers, and it's not good enough to say, well, you don't have to go to that King Soopers, you can go to that King Soopers. Well, what if you want to go to Walmart? Shouldn't you be able to go to Walmart? That's what school choice does, is it allows parents to make the decisions about where they send their kids.
I'd like to follow up on that, if that's right.
I'll give you 30 seconds as well.
Okay. Well, quite frankly, when it comes to school choice, and I do think we're going to be talking more specifically about Amendment 80, we already do have the choice. What we don't have is the tax dollars that follow that. But public schools need more funding, not less. And Amendment 80 and the School Choice Amendment takes tax dollars away from public schools, the thing that benefits all of us, and puts it towards charter schools and private schools, who quite frankly already have the funding they need.
All right, we're going to move on with the next question.
All right, Mr.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Pri. Yeah.
Ms. Gasson, at our June primary debate, you said that you would support student loan forgiveness, and you've listed a variety of stances when it comes to making higher education more affordable. Where would the money come from to pay for programs like student loan forgiveness?
Well, student loan forgiveness is something that is going to be critical for our economy. I support a Keynesian economic model, which means that the money comes from people who are able to put more money back into the economy. Like I said, I do want to tax people like the Koch brothers. I want to tax Jeff Bezos. I want to tax Elon Musk. And I'll say it again, I want to tax billionaires. I want to tax the people who are funding Jeff's campaign. I want to tax, not the individual people, the billionaires. I want to make sure that we can have that funding that goes into our economics, goes into our society. And when it comes to student debt forgiveness, this is giving young people who currently cannot afford to buy a home, who currently cannot afford to start a family, cannot afford to start a business, the ability to do that. A lot of the student loan debts that I have, for example, are taxed at, or interest rates are at 15%, even higher. I've even seen it as high as 40%. A lot of those private industries like Discover or Sallie Mae are predatory. And when you're a teenager, you don't know better. You don't know which interest rate is going to, effectively cripple you for the rest of your life as far as debt goes. When people are owing $80,000 in student loan debt, or even $100,000, that's going to follow them for the rest of their lives. And it's a house note. You can't buy a home. You can't start a family. And we are crippling our own economy when our entire generation cannot move on to the next phase of their lives.
Mr. Craig, we'll give you 1 minute.
Sure. River, can you name one billionaire who's actually, the FEC reports are public record. Can you name one billionaire who's actually given to me? Because I'd love to know. I'll give them a buzz.
I'm thinking about American for Prosperity.
Well, they've given nothing.
That are on
they've given nothing to my
your
campaign.
Mailers, aren't there?
Those aren't my mailers. They're free.
But they're paying for your campaign.
No, they're not.
But things
they haven't
of
given
yours
any
say
money.
paid for by American for
No.
Prosperity.
They have not given
Mr.
me any
Craig,
money.
can we get to your response
Yeah,
to student loans?
sure. But I can also answer her when she needlessly attacks me. So, so the question is, again, it's cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. We can just wave a magic wand and we're $35 trillion in debt. So what happens if we go and, wave the magic wand and we get rid of a bunch of student loan debt? We just added the $35 trillion in debt. Where does this money come from? We have to find something that we agree can be cut in the federal government. And so far, I haven't heard a thing.
Right now, what you propose to be cutting is the ability for the next generation to live. We don't have homes. We don't have yards. We don't have the ability to start the next generation.
What is that?
Our population is going to dwindle if we don't have the funding.
For
the
what?
Individual people to
For
be able
what?
to have kids, to be able to start families.
So we have to eliminate all student debt in order for them to do that?
Actually, yes.
Okay, well, if that's the world you want to live in, where people who are carpenters and plumbers and who went out and earned a living that way pay for the people who wanted to be philosophy majors and pay off their $100,000 in student loans, That's not the kind of world I want to live in. Those are the choices they make. They need to be responsible for those choices, just like a plumber
Mr. Crank.
or a carpenter is.
We need to move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Ernest.
All right, this time it's mine. This is a question that was submitted by a member of the audience here. Given Colorado's position as both a major producer of fossil fuels and a leader in renewable energy, as a member of Congress, how would you balance the state's energy needs with environmental concerns and the push for more sustainable energy resources? Mr. Crank, first.
Well, I'm for free market solutions. I'm not for the government skewing the marketplace. I'm not for the government creating subsidies for the oil and gas industry. I'm opposed to those. I'm opposed to ethanol subsidies, but I'm also opposed to green energy subsidies. That the federal government is making people get rich. You talk about billionaires, the people that are getting rich off these green energy deals that the taxpayers, all of us, are paying for. So we ought to get out of the business of saying you got to have this kind of vehicle or you have to have this kind of energy, and we ought to let the market decide. And not only decide, but we ought to include all of the above. You know, if we have oil and gas, great. I'm for wind and solar if they can produce and they can show they're viable. I'm also for exploring nuclear. We need to get, which by the way is more carbon neutral than about anything else out there. So we need to have an all of the above energy strategy, but it ought to be driven by the market and not by the government.
Ms. Gasson, you have a minute. What are your thoughts on balancing?
Well, I'll talk about some numbers that I share with my students when we talk about climate change. If you look at the amount of CO2 that's in our atmosphere, and then you also look at a chart of the amount of the average temperature of our atmosphere, you see that they are directly proportional to each other. And this has gone back for the past 200 years. And while there has been dramatic changes in our in our planet's temperature as the planet does tilt closer and further away from the sun, this is on a level that is amplified from what we've ever seen in the past, and it is directly proportional to carbon. We also see this on other planets of the solar system, like with Venus, for example, so we do know this is real. Climate change is real, quite frankly. And if we don't take care of our planet and our natural resources, nothing else is going to matter in the future. And I want people to vote on what is going to prioritize our future and our future generations. Solar energy is cheaper than fossil fuel, and we can use that to power our homes.
Mr. Crank, does the federal government have a role in addressing climate change?
Well, yes, certainly it does have a role in addressing climate change, but I also think it has a role in being responsible in the way that it does so. You know, it's always interesting to me that people, and particularly a political party like Kamala Harris's party, that calls itself the party of the average working folks, who don't seem to care that when you put in a green energy mandate, you drive up the cost of utilities. We all know in Colorado Springs utilities, they put in their bills now what's being driven by these green energy mandates that are coming from the state of Colorado. So we ought to balance out anything we're doing to address changes in the climate. We ought to balance that out with common sense about what it's doing to single moms and whether they have to choose between sending their kid to camp or buying a meal or sending them to a better school or whatever. These are real world decisions that average Coloradans are making every single day because the federal government and the state government is driving insanity in some of these economic areas with their energy policy.
Okay, Ms. Gasson, we'll give you 30 seconds to respond to that, but let me ask first, would you support pursuing nuclear energy in the state here?
Generally, yes. However, I want science to take the wheel on that. So long as it is safe and we are able to verify that it is safe, and the workers are able to verify that it's safe, and the experts say that it's safe, then yes. But it does need to have strict safety regulations.
Okay, and then the rest of your time, if you have anything to add.
Like I've said before, if we don't prioritize climate change, if we don't prioritize water conservation, nothing else matters. And what we need to do to drive down the price of utilities is give science the wheel. We know that sodium ion is better than lithium, and that's something that we can use for rechargeable batteries. And then I saw the timer stop, so I'll stop.
All right.
All right, we want to move on to talk about Space Command now.
Yes, Mr. Crank, we'll start with you. This question is for both of you. You'll have 90 seconds. Beyond ensuring that Space Command remains in Colorado Springs, which you both have pledged to do if elected, how will you work to strengthen the space economy in Colorado Springs, as Space Command says it wants to draw in commercial space technology?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously this is a great community that we live in, and it's driven, our economy has really been driven over the last 60 or 70 years by the influence of our military installations, from Fort Carson to all of the other installations. But over the last 20 years, you've seen it grow beyond just the installations. Now it's this whole sector of the economy that includes space and cyber technology and many other sectors to that. And we need to work hard to grow that. Look, I'm going to fight hard to make sure that Space Command stays in Colorado and stays in Colorado Springs. First thing I'm going to do on November 6th, after I win this election, is I'm going to call our 2 U.S. senators, and I'm going to talk to them about partnering on this issue. I'm also going to reach out to Jason Crow, who's a Democrat member of Congress from Colorado, was on the Armed Services Committee, may get back on, and I'm going to work with him. I'm going to reach out to them and make sure that we are working as a state to ensure that Space Command stays here. I think Space Command stays in Colorado if it is a military decision and not a political one. And I am going to fight hard to make sure that it is a military decision. And then lastly, I want to make sure, I think we can do a better job with the community and outreach. And I would say this, I'm going to form a military advisory committee, the best and brightest from our community who have supported me through my campaign, but I'm also going to pull them in and ask them to serve on a committee to help us formulate policy in the 5th Congressional District.
Ms. Gasson, same question to you. You'll have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, I do believe we can increase the funding here at Space Command and strengthen it here by increasing the job opportunities here and increasing the number of missions here. For example, we can use the satellite technology to track the melting ice caps. The Navy has given us data that shows that the melting ice caps is a national security threat. It has given Russia more ports. It is giving them more access to our NATO allies. This is something that is dangerous to us. This is something that the Navy has already provided data on, and we can use Space Force to continually track and make sure that we can make sure we have the safety here. Making sure that our allies are safe and making sure that our space technology is safe is something that Space Force is very good at, something that we can be able to strengthen and bring in students from our neighboring universities that I would like to work with alongside Space Force to make sure that we can have postdoc opportunities strengthened and brought in to our national security. Space Command can work with UCCS, with solid state physics, with making sure that we can get quantum off the ground. It can work with Pikes Peak State College and Colorado College, and making sure that we can get new innovative solutions within our national security here at Space Force and here in Colorado Springs, where it all belongs.
Mr. Crank, I'll give you 1 minute to respond.
Well, look, I mean, I think this is imperative in part of the, we talked about what committees we would like to be on, and I was pretty clear, House Armed Services Committee. I can't guarantee it, but I've been working very hard, already been working on it, even though, we still have a general election to win. I've been working hard to try and get on that committee. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be a fight. I mean, there are other people, and look, I know people have talked about certain states. Arkansas, there's lots of other states besides Alabama, Arkansas, several others that have gotten really good at going out and trying to get missions, military missions, and get them to their installation. We need to be better at it. I think we always assume that we have Pikes Peak and everybody will just starry-eyed say, well, they'll never leave because we have Pikes Peak. Well, guess what? They're being wooed by other folks and being pulled away by politicians, and we need to be better at that. And as a community, we're going to get better as I'm a member of Congress.
And Ms. Gasson, 1 minute.
Certainly. Well, I do feel like in addition to the military, not feel like, this is the data, in addition to the military industry being the strongest in our district, technology is right behind it. And with that, we can actually integrate the two. Using technology and making sure that we have the Department of Defense having some of the burden off, but making sure that they still have all the funding they need. Making sure that we can strengthen our communication by working with technology, working with the Space Command, and working with all of our military here. Keeping Space Command here is also going to just make practical sense. NORAD is here, Cheyenne Mountain is here, Peterson is here. It only makes sense. And to move it would be a national security threat. To move it would weaken us. To move it would cost billions of dollars. And the families that work here, the families that have built their lives here, they need it to be here. They don't want to uproot themselves and move to Alabama.
We'll move on to Brett for this next question.
The VA's 2023 National Veterans Suicide Prevention Annual Report found that 6,392 U.S. vets died by suicide in 2021, the most recent year for which data is available. That's 114 more than in 2020, the previous year. If elected, would you work to broaden federal support for military veterans in crisis, and how would you do so?
We'll begin with Ms. Gasson, and you'll have 90 seconds.
Thank you. It is a very serious issue and it should be a top priority. More soldiers have died after coming back from serving than have died overseas, and that is disgusting. What I'd like to do is make sure we have rigorous investigations within our VA. I'd like to have a secret shopper program that checks back to Congress with how fast they were met with mental health services. What questions were they asked and were they justified? So that way we can hold the VA accountable and make sure that each and every soldier who has served and protected us is being served and protected when they come back. It is honestly appalling that we're not taking care of our veterans, and it's the very reason why younger generations are looking at our system and saying, how can I feel that we can serve and protect a country that can't serve and protect our veterans?
Mr. Crank?
Yes. Well, it is an absolute tragedy that we see the suicide rates among veterans in the United States of America. We can do better. There's not a lot that the federal government should be doing. We're doing way too many things that we shouldn't be doing. But taking care of our veterans is one thing that we should do. Abraham Lincoln created the Department of Veterans Affairs for a reason, and it was to care for those after the Civil War. And we're just not doing a good job. We've got bureaucracy getting in the way. We need to reform it. Specifically on suicide, I mean, mental health issues need to be addressed. There need to be greater definitions for what mental health treatment is. Some people may just want to get counseling. They may not want to go to a board-certified psychiatrist, but it should be their choice. Some of those things are not possible right now under the VA, so we need to do a better job of working on that. And lastly, I would say a lot of veterans get frustrated by the healthcare system that we have for veterans. The VA system, many people love it, and to the people who love it, they should be able to go there. But again, here's a free market solution. We should allow them to go to community care without having the barrier of asking permission from the VA. If a veteran wants to choose to go get care at a community facility, they should be allowed to do that. They can't do it right now without getting a referral. And if you think of some of our rural areas around the country, how hard is it to get, to drive hours and hours to a VA facility when you've got a community care facility right there that you could use?
And we're going to send this last question on housing to Ernest. I'll give you each 1 minute for this question as we're getting towards the end of our time.
Okay.
All right, thank you. This is also one from the audience. What can you do in Congress? We'll start with River. What can you do in Congress to help make housing both more affordable and more available to Fifth CD residents? In 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, housing is a pretty big issue. Actually, 2/3 of our district is renting right now. Whether it's renting a home or renting an apartment, I'm one of the majority of our district that is renting. And it's because we can't invest within our communities. We can't buy land. And part of that is the cost of housing. It's just too expensive. To lower the cost, we need to look at potentially making smaller homes. We need to build more homes and make sure that they are prioritized for working families and families that haven't been able to buy a home yet. We need to make sure that we have a certain percentage of newly built homes that are just guaranteed for new families, new homeowners or individuals who are only owning one home. Because this is the only way that we're going to be able to make sure that we can get more people into a living home. This is also the only thing that we can do to make sure that we all live close to where we work. We need to make sure that these homes aren't just out in the middle of nowhere and we're not overdeveloping our rural communities, because we can't do that. They need water for agriculture. What we need to do is prioritize the resources here and make sure that we can all live close to where we work.
Mr. Crank.
Well, first of all, you don't want the federal government making housing policy and housing decisions. What has driven up the cost of housing more than anything else over the last 4 years under the Biden-Harris administration? Inflation. The cost of lumber, the cost of inputs into the house have all been driven up by the $35 trillion of debt that we now have and the massive spending. We went pre-COVID, we went and raised what was being spent, and we never came down after that. We need to stop spending money, and that will drive the cost of things down, and it will at least lower the rate of inflation. What happened after that happened? The Fed met and they had to raise interest rates to put the brakes on inflation. What does that do? Raise the price of housing, because now it costs you more in a mortgage to borrow the money. So, but there's other things that they're doing. There are green energy mandates at the federal level that right now are causing houses to be $30,000 more in some locations that took federal funds. Why are we doing that? That's easy if you make millions of dollars, but if you're making $50,000 or $60,000 or $80,000, you can't afford an extra $30,000 on a house.
Okay, we are now going to hear from our candidates in their closing statements. For the coin toss that we had just before the debate, Ms. Gasson will be going first. You have 2 minutes.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys all again for being here. It makes me very happy to see so many people doing their due diligence and making sure that they know how they're going to vote this election. And I want to talk about this election. This is a very historical opportunity. When I saw the inauguration of Barack Obama many years ago, I felt very proud to be an American because I saw that we were actively improving. We were making history. We were looking at the history of our country and saying, we can do better. And I got to see the 8 years that followed as an inspiration of hope for me and my family. My family lost their home during the Great Recession. We've had to be on Medicaid. We've had to be on food stamps. And we've been protected by the social safety nets that were in place by Democratic candidates. But what I also want to acknowledge is that this election is one where girls across this country are going to feel that sense of pride for the first time in a long time. They're going to see themselves as a leader of the free world, something that's going to inspire an entire generation to see our history, to see what we've done, to see that we can improve and move on to the next chapter of this great nation, that we can be proud to be Americans. With this election, we have a lot of history, and that history follows us to this district as well. If I'm elected, I'll be the youngest person going to DC out of the state of Colorado. And that is historical. Not only that, but young people have a lot at stake, and we have the least to say right now in our current political system. I'm also the first woman to run for this seat since Roe v. Wade has been overturned. And these are unprecedented times. With the rights to our own body on the ballot, we have to ask ourselves why we're not voting. Tonight, I'm asking you not just to vote for me, I'm asking you to just vote, to make sure that your voice is heard. Because if your voices aren't heard, future generations are going to ask what you did when their rights were taken away.
Mr. Crank.
Well, thank you, and thanks to KOAA TV, the Gazette, El Pomar, and all of the attendees here tonight. But I also want to thank River. I want to thank River for this spirited debate that we've had tonight, but also for stepping up and running. I mean, it takes courage to do that, and so River, thank you for doing that. It's a hard thing to do, to put yourself out there, and I'm proud of you for doing it. Look, I was born and raised in Colorado. I've spent 30 years fighting for this community, for our military installations, and for conservative values in our community. I fought to keep Fort Carson open and our military installations, to lower taxes, to support and defend the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, and to fight tax increases at the local level many times. I've supported our military and our first responders, and I've been a part of this community, as I said, literally for 33 years. My priorities in Washington will be to secure the border. No excuses, no trying to come up with some solution that everybody's got to come up and agree with and everybody gets half an apple. We need to go and deliver on securing the border. We need to work to fix Biden's and Harris's broken economy. People are hurting. They're making tough decisions right now because of excessive government spending. We need to get the debt under control. We need to eliminate government barriers to success. Now, River talked about her pride with Barack Obama. I had pride too. These times remind me of the 1980s. In the 1970s, we had 21% interest rates, malaise, and we had one political party in Jimmy Carter saying that our best days were behind us. Well, guess what? That's what Kamala Harris and the Democrats are saying today too, that we have to sacrifice, we have to pay more in taxes, we have to have green energy, inflation we have to live with, and we have to have big government. I disagree. America's best days lie ahead. We need to get our debt under control, reduce the size of government, and allow Americans to do what they do best. I'll ask for your vote. Thank you.
Let's give a big round of applause to our candidates here tonight. Mr. Crank, Ms. Gasson, thank you so much for joining us. big thank you to the panelists as well, the Gazette, the El Pomar Foundation.